When I first entered the conversation online between the skeptic community and the social justice community, if you could call it a conversation, I was expecting the opposition to, since they were so active, I was expecting them to sort of abide by the basic foundations of prosecution in the context of a courthouse, which is, in good faith, the burden of proof falls upon the prosecutor because he's making claims of guilt. When the first explosion against Atheism Plus, which was the point where the online skepticism movement could have moved from atheism to secular humanism, I remember there was a lot of talk about persecution and the idea that feminists, in particular, were going to be held to account for their claims. That was the shift between criticizing Christians and criticizing, not the shift necessarily, but the relationship, the correlation between being the right person to criticize the claims of Christianity and feminism. You will not find, before the wave of new atheists, you won't find Carl Sagan debunking feminism. Before the coffee incident between Rebecca Watson and Richard Dawkins, you probably would not have seen Richard Dawkins make the play to debunk feminism in the same way that he would approach creationists, who are the de facto adversary of atheists and skeptics. The problem with trying to debunk feminism and the other branches of the social justice tree, in my opinion, is the burden of proof is, in fact, in the favor of the Progressive Alliance. The information, I wasn't expecting this to stick this long and to metastasize so badly. I thought it would be, a bit of cultural interrogation from the skeptics towards the feminists and the people who talked about implicit racism within the civil rights movement. I thought it would pass, and it hasn't. And I think the inflection point that this can go back to is not in fact Gamergate. I think as I process where this schism happened, it was in fact the decision by the skeptic community to reject Atheism Plus. Atheism Plus was a bid by one of the larger atheist organizations to shift from atheism to secular humanism by including something more than religion is wrong. To take atheism from religion is wrong to here's what's right. Religion is wrong and humanism is right. That's what Atheism Plus means, right? So that is a upgrade from atheism, which is a little nebulous, into something with more substance, which is atheism as related to human responsibility, which was one of the first a deep experience of atheism that spoke to me, which was my realization that God, having been raised Catholic and deeply Christian, and having a lot of my sense of social obligation tied to Christianity as a kid and in school, it occurred to me that if God was not in fact watching, and God, you come to a realization when you live in a harsh environment that unfortunately God is not paying attention. And if he is paying attention, unfortunately he is not interceding on the behalf of people. God is not going to bring justice, so you are responsible. You have a responsibility to your fellow men and women to fight for justice and equality. To me, that's a one-to-one relationship. The revelation that karmic justice does not in fact exist in the supernatural sense, leading to a basic human response of empathetic social obligation. I thought that was a one-to-one, but I was wrong, because when that inflection point came, the new atheist movement decided, and this goes from Dawkins and Sam Harris on down to the YouTube skeptics and the Twitter atheists, decided that instead of going from atheism to secular humanism, they were in fact going to go from atheism to militant anti-theism. That is a step in the opposite direction. That is a step into anti, obviously. To be not only withdrawn from religious participation, but to be in opposition of religion itself. The idea shifted from I don't believe in God to I'm against God. And unfortunately, the other part of anti-theism is to be against religious people. Since God doesn't exist in the physical world, when you say you're an anti-theist, you are against people who embrace theism. It's people versus people. So the line was crossed in the wrong direction, in my opinion. The development, the decision to go misanthropic, to go anti-human, anti-compassion, after Atheism Plus took these new atheists and skeptics out of their comfort zone, I think clashed very intensely with social justice, because once anti-theism sort of ran out of gas, the purview was expanded by the prosecuting parties to include anti-belief. So the movement changed again and moved in that anti-human direction again, the misanthropic direction again, to become umbrella anti-ideology or anti-belief. The biggest criticism that I get is that my beliefs are not rational. But I'm not a computer. Reason is not an absolute good. When you are challenging creationists, maybe. it is a polar opposite of the reactionary religious right. But when you step into ideology, you are stepping into a space that can contain a lot of factual evidence supporting people's ideological stances. Ideological stances are not always based upon ethereal elements like God that can be easily debunked. You have to really do your homework if you're going to challenge an ideology, especially one as steeped in real injustice as feminism. I mean, you can't even put a creationist and a feminist on the same scale in terms of the means of debunking those two ideas. They're radically different, and I know that a lot of skeptics will use the concept of, oh well, patriarchy is the god to be debunked, the boogeyman of feminism to be debunked. But there's a lot of empirical evidence and demonstrable facts that point to the concept of a system of privilege and power within the first world and third world, more egregiously in the third world in terms of perhaps explicit exclusion. But the de facto exclusion, marginalization, and objectification of women is almost more insidious because it seems invisible. So I struggle with that when engaging in these arguments with the anti-fems and the anti-SJWs in this community. It's very off-putting to confront someone who declares himself a advocate of pure reason to tell me how they feel about feminism. It's someone persecuting you for feeling too much and then confronting you with how they feel about your feelings as a reason for you to feel less. Their justification is a double back on proof. We end up having to submit the proof, and then we face a bad faith argument of some kind. Either that our proof is biased, that it came from a biased source, and there's all this conspiratorial talk about the forces that control university studies and all the other places that used to be bastions for facts and truth, and those are no longer legitimate. It evokes to me the Tea Party movement and the struggle that the left had fighting with the Tea Party movement, and the idea that if something didn't come off of one of their sources, off of one of their selective websites that reinforced their biases and hatreds and their negative assumptions, the anti-socialism. That was their big one, anti-socialism. And any argument was an economic argument, and they would cite to you a source that was heavily, heavily biased. And then you would present your own source, and since it wasn't biased in their direction, of course, when you are used to your sources of evidence highly endorsing your point of view, you are going to assume that the other side is engaging in this sort of behavior. It's like projection. I'd like to see a future where I feel like I can participate in atheism and not be alienated and not have to become anti-human and not have to become anti-belief. I thought the only qualifier for being a part of the atheist community was not believing in God, but we are at a point where believing in anything at all is forbidden within the skeptic community. You'll present your facts, and they'll be pushed aside, cherry-picked and reverse engineered. And it's unfortunate. I'd like to see a more humanistic atheism, is what I'm saying. Because the anti-human atheist movement is dangerous.